Welcome back to Plato's Cave. This is the third episode in the multi-part series on the philosophy of mind and consciousness. And I'm not doing a great job of keeping pace with my new resolution, I guess you could call it, to get these episodes out in a more timely manner. I apologize for that. I was in the middle of a move to Southern California. If you listen to previous episodes, you'll know that I am about to begin my PhD in philosophy at USC, which still sounds crazy to say out loud. But that means that I was delayed on many fronts, not just on the podcast front, for the last couple weeks during the move. But that is largely over, so I'm hoping to kind of get back on a better pace with releasing these episodes. So this episode probably should have been released before the previous, actually, but it is what it is at this point. This is a recording that Adam and I did a little over a year ago, when we thought we were going to kind of follow along with a seminar I was taking at the time. That was at the University of Houston, on the philosophy of mind and consciousness. And this is a chapter by David Chalmers in an edited volume called The Blackwell Guide to Philosophy of Mind, which was published in 2003. And it's a chapter by Chalmers called Consciousness and Its Place in Nature. And this is where I think this is a great resource where Chalmers really lays out, I think, a lot of the groundwork that leads up to what we discussed in the previous episode, which was his non-reductive theory of consciousness. We discuss at length why Chalmers thinks that consciousness is a genuinely hard problem, what he means by the hard problem of consciousness, and his discussion of three arguments against reductionist materialism: the explanatory argument, the conceivability argument, and the knowledge argument. We also reference another paper by Patricia Churchland that is titled The Hornswoggle Problem. Churchland does not believe that the problem of consciousness is a genuinely hard problem, and basically critiques it as an argument from ignorance. So this one is just going to be Adam and me. And after this, I think we will get back to Adam and Giffen and I. But we'll have to see. We kind of have a few episodes that we recorded from a while back, just Adam and I. So we'll have to see. Maybe those will see the light of day. But with that prolonged introduction, please enjoy this discussion. We should probably we'll just say like a brief intro about the new series that we're doing. So it's going to be following one of my seminars this spring at U of H on consciousness and the philosophy of mind. I mean, from what I understand, it's going to be a pretty standard course. Like we're doing kind of what you would do as a seminar on philosophy of mind. Okay. Which is, I'm actually very happy about that, because, I mean, we both have very limited experience, but I have limited experience even sort of like as a philosophy grad student. You know what I mean? Sure. So, because I mean, honestly, I've had, I think, 3 people on the podcast. I had Philip Goff. We discussed panpsychism. I had David Papineau. We discussed materialism, and Bernardo Kastrup, and we discussed idealism. But that was like 3 years ago, maybe. And I obviously read some of their stuff for those conversations. And then we read, when we had those discussions with Giffen a couple years ago, we read Thomas Nagel's What Is It Like to Be a Bat? We read Chalmers' Facing Up to the Problem of Consciousness. And what else did we read for that?
I mean, that was it.
Was it really it? Okay, so yeah, honestly, that's like, besides these intro readings, that's a good bit of, I mean, that probably covers 75% of like what I've actually read or studied on this topic.
Yeah, and I know even less than you. So, but it too has always been, just a real focal point of interest. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just how elusive it is,
It's it's
and
so
how fun the conversations typically are surrounding it. So,
I completely agree.
yeah,
And also like I don't know, I mean I know that I would say this even if it wasn't true, but it's true that I'm genuinely actually thankful for that because I do feel like I'm coming into this as close to a blank slate as possible in a lot of ways,
sure.
where like I can't even say right now. I can say that one position in the debate is off the table for me, and that's like eliminativism, but that's it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I'm probably somewhere around there too. I'm fairly open minded right now. Although some of what we've read and discussed prior to these readings definitely
of course.
influenced how I interpreted some of these readings. So
I completely agree. Do you want to start with do you want to okay, so I guess we should say, I mean, this is going to be largely an introductory conversation to the series. I mean, do you want to start with the Chalmers chapter?
yeah, sure.
Okay. So this is we're going to discuss there's this chapter by David Chalmers called Consciousness and Its Place in Nature. It's showing up in the Blackwell Guide to Philosophy of Mind. I don't know when this was published, but I think it's it says copyright 2003. Okay. So, I mean, fairly recent.
Sure.
And from what I understand, I think there was a big like explosion in uh this area of philosophy in the 1990s with Chalmers. He didn't like invent a lot of these arguments, but he popularized them. And apparently in the 90s was when these conferences in Arizona started happening every 2 years. Shit, I can't. Oh, they were called the Tucson Conferences Towards a Science of Consciousness. So these were like happening in the 90s where there was kind of an explosion of philosophers becoming interested in the philosophy of mind and consciousness and exploring these ideas. So I from what I understand from Josh, the professor, the field is like fairly well mapped out, but there's a lot of work that is still available to be done. So it's I don't know, it's pretty interesting. I'm actually very excited for the seminar.
No, definitely.
Okay. Um, do you want to I mean, I'm just thinking like obviously we should focus on Chalmers' framing of the hard problem because that really kind of gets on the table like I mean everything we're pretty much talking about at this point. So this is section 5.2. So Chalmers says I think this actually explains it very well. So the word consciousness is used in many different ways. It is sometimes used for the ability to discriminate stimuli or to report information or to monitor internal states or to control behavior. We can think of these phenomena as posing the easy problems of consciousness. So uh, basically, like what we're not talking about when we're talking about consciousness are these easy problems. So we're not talking about like, I think a lot of people tend to conflate consciousness with something like being self-aware.
I
Or
completely agree because I've had a conversation with someone where that conflation was made.
yeah,
So yeah,
or I also I think other people have conflated it with something else like memory too. Like if you're conscious of something, you should have a memory of it, which I think is again like a slight conflation.
yeah.
Um, so Chalmers, I actually don't know if this is his term or not. Chalmers juxtaposes the easy problems with the hard problem. So the hard problem of consciousness, he says, the next paragraph, is the problem of experience. Human beings have subjective experience. There is something it is like to be them. We can say that a being is conscious in this case, or is phenomenally conscious, as it is sometimes put, where there is something it is like to be that thing. And I know that that framing is Nagel's, which
Yeah.
there was an interesting split as to whether people liked that framing of it or not, what it is like to be something. I'm pretty sure you agree with this. I love that framing.
I think there's like no other framing for it. like I
Yes, I
like no, like
complete-
actually though,
I completely
like
agree.
if we're talking about like experience, that's what I mean by it. Like if I were to become, you know, this can right now, is there anything to being this can, or would it just
Yes.
be equivalent to non-existence if I became that can? Like, is that what we're talking about? You know,
Yes.
so no, I completely agree. And just a quick comment before you talk about what the class thought, just while it's on my mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Just like the easy problems for me, and we'll see if there are any exceptions to this. Like in a sense, they are very easy problems because the thing is, these are just all things computers do.
Yeah.
Like all those things are just what computers do.
Mm,
So, holding things in memory, like, basic input output, stimuli, discrimination,
yeah.
creating different structures. And, it's like all those things can get extremely sophisticated, but it's like, well, someone could say, well, we don't know how those things are done biologically. That's true. Like that needs to be discovered how biologically those things are represented, but we know they can be physically represented. That's not the issue. Like we know we've done it with computers. So
Yeah.
um I just want
Oh,
to point that out as well.
no, no, no. That's actually very good. And I was gonna say, because that made me think of something, but then it also made me think of what Josh thought about it. But then I realized I should actually give his full name so he can get kind of like credit for teaching the class. Not the, well, whatever. So people know who we're talking about. This is Josh Weisberg from the University of Houston, who's teaching the class. He's phenomenal too. Actually, he's like one of those professors where you're saying your kind of thought and he gets it before you're able to finish, and then he's already like giving like mapping like giving you what you want.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually
Yeah.
it's very enjoyable
A
to
true
say.
expert. What actually is his area of focus in
This
philosophy?
this
Okay, so
yeah,
theory of mind is okay.
yes,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. This is his thing. So
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah, and I think I was telling you a little bit like remember I was saying he's on the other side of the spectrum from where we take ourselves to be starting at least. Um he's so that's still true, but I might have oversold to you how far on the other end of the spectrum he is. So we were talking about like the explanatory gap, the hard problem.
Yeah.
He's I think it would be fair to describe him as some sort of reductionist materialist, but he's one who, like Joseph Levine from the reading, he takes the like explanatory gap and the hard problem very seriously. Like
Okay.
he's like I feel the pull of this.
Okay.
Um,
Like he recognizes it. Okay.
yes, yeah, yeah, and he's also like not an eliminativist.
It's,
So
it's not like the Hornswoggle paper.
no,
So
no,
so
no,
okay.
no.
Okay.
Um, and what? Okay, okay. There was something that you said. Oh, okay. Yeah, because I asked this to Josh in class because I was like, okay, the way because what you said was exactly my thinking, where it's like, okay, you think of something and you imagine trading places with that thing, and the way that I asked him if this was okay to think about it, because the way that makes the most sense to me is like that juxtaposition, but asking sort of like I assume that if I were to trade places with this cup, that would be the equivalent of like the lights going out. Like if I were to just like
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
exist. Um, and that presumably wouldn't be true if I were to trade places with a bat, to use like Nagel's example. So that's one way to think about it. But another way to think about it is I've undergone general anesthesia once. Have you ever
When I was 6.
okay, so like not a great memory of it, I assume.
Um, a memory,
Okay.
but not a great memory.
I think I was a little older, like 12, 13, when I had this one surgery. I remember I actually have a vivid memory of because I was like nervous as hell. You know what I mean? I have a distinct memory of like they put that mask on you and they make you
Sure.
count down from 10,
Yep, I
and
recall
I
that.
and I got to like 7, and it was like it was literally as though I did not exist until I was like woke up in the bed again, in the kind of recovery room. Like it I almost thought about it as like, consciousness. There are all these kind of, uh, oscillations, that, peak experiences, like bad, you can almost think about it as like fluctuations on a curve.
There's some sort of state in a sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was flatlined. Like there was
Yeah.
just it, I mean, I if I never woke up from that, there would be no difference from between that and dying. Like none, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think the difference is I think that difference is also illustrative of what we're talking about when we're talking about consciousness. Because uh Josh, I don't think he likes that term as much as we do, because he was saying, well, it invites some confusion because, well, you look at a table and you're like, well, there's something that's like to be that table. It's here, it's got this shape, it's got this form, it's got this hardness or whatever. And then that's when I said what I said to you. I was like, yeah, but I don't think that's the sense in which he means it. It's like if you were to trade places with the table, is
Yes.
there anything?
Yes.
And obviously, like Josh wasn't saying that that's what his criticism was. He was just saying it invites that kind of misunderstanding in a way.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say the same thing is true of me on the table. Like when I was sedated, there was something that it was like to be me in that sense. Like, like there was a body, it had a certain mass, a certain temperature, whatever, right? But like I like experientially, I did not exist. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what we're talking about. Um and
No, I
so
mean, we share that exact same intuition on this point. So,
yes. Um the other thing that's very interesting to me, and this also seems correct, is that so Chalmers says, well, okay, what this is on the next page, what makes the easy problems easy and what makes the hard problem hard? And I think just flatly agree with this as well. So when we're talking about the easy problems, they're easy because when we ask these questions, Chalmers says the task is to explain certain behavioral or cognitive functions. That is, to explain how some causal role is played in the cognitive system, ultimately in the production of behavior. So these focus on functions. We're asking, like, when we ask, what's a good example? How does vision work? We're asking, like, okay, how does what exists in the world get translated into information in the brain? Pretty much.
yeah. Yeah.
And when we're okay, well, this gets to like the explanatory gap a little bit, but when we ask that and we are provided with an answer, the answer is spelled out in terms of explaining a function. But for some, and I think for me and you, that is not the case when we're talking about consciousness. It's not a question about function, because consciousness doesn't seem to reduce to a function. When we're asking why is there something that it's like to be us, we're not asking for a sort of mechanistic, or at least that's the thought, is that a mechanistic explanation of function doesn't get at that question. There's still a further question that does not get answered by that. Is that how you read that as well?
Yeah, for the most part. I think like when I hear talk of like vision and like the functions involved there, um let me phrase this carefully. I think some question marks do pop up for me a little bit of
Mm,
just like okay, we've got the electromagnetic wave. It hits certain structures in the eyes, which cause a chain reaction for some sort of physical representation in the brain at that point.
mm-hmm,
And at that point, it's like, okay, we're just talking about function. We're just talking about really physical reactions taking place there.
mm-hmm.
But I think at that point, though, there are a bunch of question marks that begin to pop up, such as like, okay, I don't know. I don't want to jump the gun on anything, but here's
Well,
just kind
I
of
mean,
just
jump it
just
because,
spitballing.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, like, what do you think of like this idea? Like when I hear that, I'm like, okay, well, what if there is one area of the brain that represents essentially the information that was received,
Mm-hmm,
and then another area of the brain that interprets that, and then another area of the brain that interprets kind of the interpretation, but it's less so exactly how it happens, but I wonder if, like, through different layers in a sense.
Different modules of
Yeah,
yeah.
what we're really seeing is just like kind of layers of interpretation in a sense that,
Hmm.
and I'm not trying to be an eliminativist here, but I'm just wondering, like,
Hmm.
is there something to that there where it's like there truly are abstractions of interpretation here
Mm.
that we're missing in the process?
Okay, so question for you, like that seems to be does that seem to be like an easy problem that we haven't fully understood yet? Because I could imagine the answer to that would be spelled out in terms of function. And then you could ask a further question about vision, which is like, okay, but why is there something that's like 2C still? Like,
Well, and once again, like these thoughts aren't fully formed.
yeah,
I
of
mean, they're
course.
like
Yeah.
by any stretch,
No.
but I wonder if some function in place that is kind of collecting interpretations of information. This is all physical.
Yeah.
I wonder if that function itself, there's something to performing that function in a sense through the interpretation. Like that's not especially coherent, but
I mean, I think I get what you're like trying to paint towards. It's like well, maybe I'm like, okay, I kind of have a similar thought that is, we should talk about at some point, like what positions in the debate we're open to and where our initial leanings are. But I guess it's as good a time as any. There's something that might be close to what you're saying that actually I think like I am mildly, I would say that I'm openly interested in and leaning towards epiphenomenalism actually, which is kind of a crazy position in the debate to a lot of people, but it also is like not one that seems incorrect, at least initially to me. um
yeah, what I was saying right there was an epiphenomenal phenomenal position right there. Because like
yeah.
because the thing is, it's not I and once again, it's nothing I'm saying is especially coherent, but I do have some pull to an extent where there is just so many different areas of the brain that are kind of like there are divisions of the brain or a
Yeah.
division of labor in a sense
Mm.
where there's one that actually does all kind of the raw interpretation, but I'm wondering if there's like a side of the brain that's almost like the observer in a sense where it's more so like
Yeah.
constructing models based on the raw data that comes in at that point.
Hmm.
And I wonder if you have enough models that at that point, that's kind of how consciousness emerges to some degree. Is like,
Yeah.
okay, we have all these models in place at this point. What does like, and there's one side of the brain that's then kind of viewing these models and kind of interacting with them in some case. I wonder,
Yeah.
like, is that what you mean by consciousness? I mean, I don't know.
So okay, so I'm trying to put on my Chalmers hat, and I think what he would say to this is, okay, well, he would be listening to us too and say like, okay, but still, like, we've got to be careful because on the one hand, you could describe that entire thing in purely functional terms and give what seems to be a complete picture without bringing in the idea that there's something that it's like to be that thing, or at least it's not obvious, like it's not obvious why or how the what its likeness would emerge from that, at least on its face. Like I you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not obvious that it
It's
would. I agree with
yes,
that. It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
obvious
yeah.
that it would. I guess my only point is that it's not obvious to me that it wouldn't either.
Agreed.
Like
Agreed. Yes.
I know there's the aspect of the burden of proof here, you know what I mean? But at
Sure.
the same time,
Yeah.
it's just like when
Yeah.
we're talking about what things are, you know, are there truly insurmountable gaps in a sense? Like I wonder,
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna discuss this over the course of the semester. So
Should we talk?
um
I wonder if actually like talking about those three arguments would kind of like crispen this up then.
yeah, yeah, let's do so.
Because okay, so from I guess these are sort of like I mean, from what I understand, I think Josh said something similar to this. These three arguments are pretty much the generic version of the entire debate, where everything else is more specific versions of these and
Yeah,
like kind of
okay.
building off of these. Okay, so these three arguments are supposed to be what get you off the ground to thinking there's a problem here, that you could have a complete functional explanation of anything you think is related to this field, whether that's the brain, whether that's like whatever else is going on, and still have this gap in um, if these arguments hold, it would be coherent to still have this unanswered question. But why is there anything that it's like to be that system? Why can't this all be going on in the dark? So the first is the explanatory argument. Um, so basically, I mean, this is let's actually, I mean, we can honestly just read them out in like
Do you
the
want me to read the explanatory arguments?
yeah, read because it's just a simple
It's
two-step
pretty quick.
argument.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want me to read just the syllogism, or do you want me to read the entire block for the
You
explanatory argument?
yeah, read the entire block.
Okay. The first argument is grounded in the difference between the easy problems and the hard problem, as characterized above. The easy problems concern the explanation of behavioral and cognitive functions, but the hard problem does not. One can argue that by the character of physical explanation, physical accounts explain only structure and function, where the relevant structures are spatiotemporal structures, and the relevant functions are causal roles in the production of a system's behavior. And one can argue as above that explaining structures and functions does not suffice to explain consciousness. If so, no physical account can explain consciousness. We can call this the explanatory argument. 1. Physical accounts explain at most structure and function. 2. Explaining structure and function does not suffice to explain consciousness. Ergo, 3.
Hmm.
No physical account can explain consciousness.
Hmm.
If this is right, then while physical accounts can solve the easy problems, which involve only explaining functions, something more is needed to solve the hard problem. It would seem that no reductive explanation of consciousness could succeed. And if we add the premise that what cannot be physically explained is not itself physical, this can be considered an additional final step at the explanatory argument, then materialism about consciousness is false, and the natural world contains more than the physical world.
Pause.
Okay.
Because I just realized maybe we should say two things for ourselves, but also for the audience. There are two terms we've been using, reductive and materialism, that we should talk about. So if you sign up for a reductive explanation, that means you think that the phenomenon of consciousness can be wholly explained in reductive terms. So this parallels other areas of debate. So basically, like ecology is wholly reducible to individual animal behavior, or chemistry is wholly reducible to physics. So it's just there's something about like explanations that include the word just if you're a reductionist. So consciousness is just and then fill in the blank.
Yeah.
If you're a materialist, that means that blank that you fill in is wholly naturalistic or physical things. So it's you don't need to go extra physical or extra material to explain consciousness. So those are kind of the two positions that the hard problem is pushing back against. It doesn't seem to be purely reductive and purely reductive in materialistic terms, because as you just read, it seems that like when we give accounts of structure and function, there is this like remaining question, but okay, like that explains kind of what it does, or like what I mean, like the behavior essentially that we undertake. But like for some, these like arguments pull you, there is still a further question. Okay, but why is there anything that it's like to why is there experience on top of the behavior?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. And just a quick clarifying question here.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, like materialism and you know, would it be reductivism? Is that
Mm-hmm.
the actual? Okay, so reductivism. Obviously, they're like distinct in a sense, like those two concepts.
Mm-hmm.
But within the sphere of conversation, is it typical that most reductivists are in fact materialists?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
Okay.
It's hard to even. I mean, I wonder if like if you were an I if you were an idealist, so if you think like everything is mental, there's no physical material or whatever in like the universe, it's all mental. I wonder if that would be a non-materialistic reduction explanation. Um it kind of seems like it would be, but I do think almost everything in the debate they are paired. Um
Okay.
I suppose you could. So because I was asking Josh about this, because epiphenomenalism seems like it actually resists being kind of neatly put into a box, or at least you can have different versions of epiphenomenalism. So epiphenomenalism could have a wholly reductive explanation, but defy materialism. So if you think that like consciousness is this thing that emerges from physical systems, but it itself is not merely physical, it's floating along with it. Um, that seems like it would defy pairing the two. Uh, because I guess dualism is the non reductive, non materialistic version of that, where there are these two substances, mental and physical, and they're conjoined or they interact in some like specified way. I think.
So you're saying you think that if you're a materialist, you have to ultimately concede that consciousness is materialistic.
Uh yes, you can't be involving anything above naturalistic explanations.
Okay, so you couldn't say like, okay, I think there's a materialistic basis to it, but consciousness itself is non-material.
Then I
If
think
you're a
you would, yes.
materialist,
Then I think
okay,
you'd be a non-materialist, even though you might be still a reductionist.
okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how I was understanding it at least.
okay, okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, but like to me, and like I asked this again to Josh, like, this didn't seem wrong to him. It's hard for me to actually call the explanatory argument and the next one we're going to talk about different arguments. Um, the conceivability argument, because if you think about it, it seems like premise two of what you just read. So, okay, the first premise is physical accounts explain at most structure and function. Plausible enough. The second premise, explaining structure and function, does not suffice to explain consciousness. Therefore, no physical account can explain consciousness. To me, it seems like what you think about two, it, I don't even understand how you would examine premise two without talking about the conceivability argument. It just seems like, to me, the conceivability argument is providing the fodder for premise two there. Um,
Yeah, because it doesn't like the whole point of the conceivability argument is like whether or not structure and function necessitate like
exactly.
like if it's we'll get into it, but
Mm-hmm.
if there's no like logical necessitation in a sense,
Yeah.
then that's kind of where the mystery comes in. So
Yeah. And I think the conceivability argument is probably the most famous
it's
one.
probably my favorite because
It's
I think
very
that's the
cool.
strongest pull for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Should I say it and then we can discuss it real quick? I mean,
yeah, totally.
it's a very simple argument again. It's basically the idea that so I pose to you the question, can you conceive of beings physically constituted just as we are? They perform the exact same functions, they demonstrate the exact same behavior, but these are creatures for whom there's nothing that it's like to be that creature. So trading places with a zombie would be experientially the same as trading places with a cup. It'd be like the lights going out. Now, the question is not whether these beings would be possible in our actual world. It's whether you can conceive of in a like a nearby world where evolution works differently, or whatever, whatever the explanation is. Like, can you conceive of beings who demonstrate the same behavior but who are not conscious? And I mean, like at first this seems kind of dumb, but when you think about it, especially in evolutionary terms, at least for me, like that's when I'm like, yeah, I definitely fucking can. Like,
Yeah.
like can I imagine an evolutionary story where behavior of organisms was such that it could happen with the lights off internally? I'm like, yeah, I could. Like it very easily seems like that could happen.
Like, no question. And I think oftentimes people maybe focus on people a little too much for this argument.
I
Where
completely agree. I
yeah,
completely
where I
agree.
think that they kind of miss the point in a sense, where I think it's better to choose something like maybe a toad, you know what I mean? Where
Yes,
it's
yes.
just like I mean the argument still applies just as well, where it's like, okay, I think many people would subscribe to the idea that if one became a toad, there'd be something like being a toad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But the toad itself, like we understand that what kind of undergirds much of what the toad actually does, or everything that the toad does, is physical. Like if
yeah.
you were to zoom into the toad's brain, it's just chemical reactions. Like, could we imagine all those same chemical reactions occurring, but there's just nothing like being the toad? And it's like,
Yes.
sure, I can actually. So
The way that Chalmers lays this out is kind of interesting because there are like multiple things you think this argument could be doing.
here, let me give one thing that pops into mind here. Like what it does for me is, for me, I can imagine highly complex physical processes going on, regardless of whether they're happening, in the human brain or elsewhere, where there is no experience associated with them.
Yes.
On the other hand, we live in a world where there are highly complex physical processes where there's an experience associated with them. That distinction for me
Yes.
is as clear as
Yes.
day. So
That's a perfect way to put it. And it perfectly illustrates the question that we're trying to get at, which is, okay, why is there something that it's like to be our, you know, organization of processes or like what? Yeah,
exactly,
exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
that's how
Yes.
I understand the argument. So
Yes. It's interesting that Chalmers like thinks it does a lot more actually. Because I'll read out his, like the way he like his, one, two, three, four. So he's three premises that argues for a conclusion. One, it is conceivable that there be zombies. Two, okay, check. Two, if it is conceivable that there be zombies, it is metaphysically possible that there be zombies. That one I'm like, maybe, like, probably. It seems really like we were saying, like, why couldn't evolution produce beings that are as complex but just without the lights being on? I mean, that seems plausible enough, but maybe. And then three,
that
if
that one's a tough one for me too, because it's just
yeah,
like conceivability and possibility are kind of different, because it's just like
completely agree.
you could be wrong in what you're like, you
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
like if logically you were right that it's conceivable, then you're totally right that it's metaphysically possible,
Yes,
but your logic might be wrong. You know what I mean?
completely
Like there
agree.
might be a logical error in your thinking there.
Yeah,
So
because you and I will run into people who can conceive of like the stupidest possible things where they're
like,
like,
yeah.
oh, wait, oh, it's dangerous to give like an example there actually, but like, because like, some listener, hey,
Well, I just like, I mean, and the thing is, I don't know if this is a good or a bad example, but it also kind of depends on the person too, where like if you were to say
Yeah,
like
yeah.
like I could conceive of the identity property not holding.
It was my
Like
exact,
like
yes, that was my
think
exact
like you would
example.
look at
Yeah.
me, you would say like, can you? Like what does that even mean? Like for you to be able to conceive that? You know what I mean? So like I
Yes.
think there is a little bit of I don't know, kind of depends on the individual too.
Yeah, and that's where like Patricia Churchland in like the Hornswoggle problem, like that was the aspect of that pulled me the most, where she's like, don't mistake your own ignorance for like a
Yeah.
metaphysical. Yeah.
Dude, you and I were the exact same point on that.
Okay.
I didn't love most of that paper, but I
But
loved
that
that aspect.
I
I was like, fair
completely
enough, fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah, because
So
I'm like, to be honest, that's right. And it also is my exact thinking on other topics. Like it's kind of interesting because I know we're gonna be in the exact same position with this, where like, you know, you start signing up for arguments, or you at least think they're plausible with consciousness. But if you were to fill in something like God or whatever, you'd be like, get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? Like that's
yeah,
yeah. And I they're obviously different in, like other relevant ways. But again, I if you just swap in zombies for here for God, I'd be like, maybe not. You know what I mean? So like
there is a little bit of the argument from incredulity in a
there is a
sense where
little bit,
I
yes.
personally couldn't imagine how,
It,
this
yeah.
gap could be crossed. And it's like
Eh,
that doesn't mean that
It,
that's not an argument for there in fact being a gap.
I
Like that
completely agree. And the jump from 2 to 3 is kind of large too, where like, so it's okay. It's conceivable that there are zombies. If it's conceivable, then it's metaphysically possible. If it's metaphysically possible that there be zombies, then consciousness is non-physical. Like maybe, but it also doesn't. I don't understand why you couldn't run kind of a version of this argument on itself, where like but isn't it metaphysically conceivable that it could be like physical? Like that also seems conceivable. Like
can you point me out to where
oh,
two and three are? I want to kind of track that
this is
myself
on
here.
106 of the
Okay, okay.
yeah. So it's like, well, why couldn't it be completely conceivable that it is actually just like an outcome of physical processes? So then it doesn't seem like that. It's just like I think this argument's really interesting, but it seems to be doing less than what Chalmers thinks it's doing here. Because his conclusion from this is that consciousness is non-physical, and it's just like maybe, but I'm not sure that that argument does enough there to convince me of that conclusion.
Pause on two to three a little more here, just to
Yeah.
make sure I'm fully tracking this one. So if it is conceivable that there are zombies, so physical systems that do not necessarily or physical systems that do not produce experience,
Yep.
it is metaphysically possible that there be zombies. Okay. I think that let's just take that one for to be true for now. So because we have issues with that, but
Yep.
um
Okay. So granting two.
we're going to grant to
Okay.
if it is metaphysically possible that there be zombies, then consciousness is non-physical. So it's like, so we're granting that A does not necessitate B,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if A does not necessitate B, then consciousness is non, or then B is non-physical if A is
This is where I
physical.
start to get confused about like metaphysical arguments, because couldn't you also just say, okay, um, like grant me these premises, which seem not implausible. It is conceivable that consciousness is a byproduct of purely physical processing. If it's conceivable, then it's metaphysically possible. If it's metaphysically possible, then it can be physical. Right? Like I I mean, to me, like there is a premium in my mind, at least, put on explaining why in this universe consciousness seems to be, I don't even want to say like non-physical. It's just there's
Well,
some there.
one thing real fast, like don't
Yeah.
you think like the argument's a lot more narrow that's actually being made here, which is that like like, okay, if we're going to grant a lot of this, I'm going to grant that it's conceivable there are zombies.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to grant that if I can conceive that there are zombies, then it's metaphysically possible that there be zombies. Like, okay. But like, shouldn't we read that if it is metaphysically possible that there be zombies, then not all physical systems lead to a um lead to consciousness as we conceive it here. Like
Yes.
it's less
Then there is not a necessary connection between complex physical systems and consciousness.
yeah,
That
exactly.
should be
Yeah,
yes.
I
Yes.
like when you start throwing in like the non-physical aspect there, it's just
Mm.
like, well, like you haven't narrowed the like you haven't divorced the idea of could there not be some physical systems that lead to consciousness, but other physical systems that don't?
You're
You know what I
complete.
mean? Like they're like
Yes. You're putting
so
into words what my issue was with this is that his conclusion. His conclusion. I don't. I'm not hitting the term right, but his conclusion is almost like a one-to-one. Consciousness is non-physical, whereas it should be. There is not a necessary connection between physical systems and the emergence of consciousness.
yes,
That's
I completely agree. That's
yes.
exactly what it should be there. Because I
Yes,
don't
yes. Because that I actually 100% agree with that more
yeah,
narrow conclusion, because then it's like, oh shit, there doesn't seem to be a necessary connection. Now let's think through like, but could it be? Maybe it is actually.
yeah.
But yeah. Okay. Oh, that actually is very illuminating to me, like that little digression we just went on.
No, definitely. Because I think that's fundamentally what it is because like okay, we imagine this metaphysically possible situation, but it's like, okay, well, the physical system, in fact, could be different. That's giving rise to no consciousness versus a different physical system, which is our universe, which does. So, like, yeah, I that's more where the narrow critique is here.
And also, like, I think the correct conclusion of or I guess like the valid conclusion of that argument is everything that you want it to be if you buy the hard problem. Like,
Yes, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
I think what's going on here is like the boldness of the hard problem seems to require like a very bold like conclusion of an argument for it, but it actually doesn't need one that bold.
I agree because you're definitely I mean like you're trying to cut out materialism with this argument in addition to kind of a reductive
Mm-hmm.
perspective
Mm-hmm.
when in reality what you should be cutting out is
You're trying to cut out it's weird because there's double negatives here. You're trying to cut out the non-plausibility of non-reductive arguments. Like you're essentially trying to, I think what you're
yes,
trying,
I agree with
yes,
that.
yes,
Yeah, I agree
yeah,
with that. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I do agree with that perspective.
You're trying to get on the table that it's not obvious that consciousness has to be explainable in like reductionistic physical terms.
Completely agree. That's what this argument is about.
I
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes, and the reason why I think this is a linchpin in the explanatory argument, it's not even a linchpin in it. I think they're this. I think there are two sides of the same coin. Is that all you're doing is when you say that explaining structure and function does not suffice to explain consciousness. When you actually unpack what that is just the conceivability argument. You're just saying, okay, it doesn't explain it because I can conceive of all of the structure and function being there without consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And then, okay, so the third one, the knowledge argument, is very interesting because this is a famous thought experiment by Frank Jackson. Frank Jackson. It's called Mary the Color Scientist. This is a really interesting argument because it's again, it's doing something, but um it's slippery. There's something slippery about this
there
argument.
is.
So
Yeah.
so the argument is that okay, imagine this woman Mary who lives in a black and white room, or at least a room that does not contain red. There's nothing red. She's spent her entire life in this room, and she's also a brilliant scientist who studies color. So she knows all of the physical facts about the color red. Now, the question is, if she were to be like let out of the room and she sees a red apple, has she learned anything new that goes beyond her knowledge of the entirety of the physical facts about red? And Frank Jackson, now I didn't actually know this, but Jackson apparently changed his mind about this argument. When he originally conceived of it, Jackson concluded that the answer is yes. She's learning something new that is a fact about the color red that she did not previously know. And so the argument in very simple form is that premise one, Mary knows all the physical facts about red. Premise two, Mary does not know all the facts about red. Two is evidenced by the fact that, she's learning something new when she leaves the room. The conclusion of those two premises is that the physical facts do not exhaust all the facts. So there are non-physical facts about red. And then, you do a little bit of work in this. This can be generalized to the debate we're talking about as just, okay, well, all of the physical facts about consciousness do not explain consciousness fully. While there could be, correlates or like the easy problems that we're talking about.
I think on its face, it's very powerful, but then you begin to get into it a little bit and you start to have questions about individual words.
Agreed.
I think this was in Levine that there was a response given to this.
This is Joseph Levine. I don't know if this is going to get exactly what you're saying, but I have a few highlights. He says, even though I do not accept Jackson's metaphysical conclusion, I do think Jackson's story of Mary does show something important about Mary's epistemic situation. In particular, her ability to explain qualia in physical terms. We should say qualia is like a philosophical word for what we've been talking about of like phenomenology or experience, or the what it is likeness to experience something. So if we're talking about the color red, there are all of these facts about it that we can talk about in like scientific materialistic terms, like what's its wavelength associated with the color red, like these other questions. But then the phenomenological question is, okay, like what is the experience of seeing red like, though, for the person who's seeing it? So he continues. The fact that it seems so clear that she would learn what it's like to experience red is testimony to the explanatory gap that separates physical theory and conscious experience. So what I think Levine is saying there is that, okay, this is evidence that if you're a kind of a reductionist, or maybe reductionist, maybe materialist, I don't know which this targets better, but you would think that if you've learned all of the physical facts, then there shouldn't, what's the thought here? So if you know all of the physical facts, there shouldn't be anything that you're missing that could be brought about by seeing red, by having red demonstrated to you for the first time. I don't know.
All right, so here are my thoughts on it here.
Okay.
I definitely think this is targeting materialism.
Okay.
Because I think the argument is going like this.
Mm-hmm.
So Mary knows all the physical facts.
Mm-hmm.
Mary does not know all the facts.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, the fact she does not know must be non-physical, right? So,
yes.
And if materialism, if it follows that to be a materialist, one must view experience to be a purely physical, or to be purely physical,
mm-hmm.
then
knowing all the physical facts about consciousness should tell you everything about it. But
there's a little bait and switch here, though. I mean, with this one, because the thing is, like, I think a materialist would argue that if Mary does not know what it is like to see red, then she is not in possession of all the physical facts at that point, because that might be a physical fact if conscious experience is physical.
Yes, because if it is physical, you've just So if it is physical, what you've done by saying she hasn't seen red, or that she doesn't know what it's like to see red, is that all you've done is you've just said, well, she doesn't actually know all the physical facts. Then you give me one more physical fact and then say, aha, it's not physical. But that's assuming that it's not physical in the first place.
It's exactly right. You're
Yes.
assuming it's a non-physical fact with this
Yeah.
baked in there. So there it is kind of a little slippery that way.
Okay, so I'm looking at one of your paintings, and there is, of course, a brain state associated with that. But I could have a complete description of that brain state, and it does not complete the level of analysis if I'm asking you what it's like to look at that painting. Like, it's just not the right level of analysis. But I don't know what follows from that. Another way I was thinking about this was kind of, I had this thought when I was reading the Churchland, the Hornswoggle problem, where I was thinking, so okay, so Patricia and Paul Churchland are like these famous, like married philosopher couple, and I was thinking like, okay, I was thinking about say I'm like I'm in a position where I'm thinking about getting married to someone, and I'm like, but I just, I don't know, is this right? Like whatever, and I see Patricia and Paul's marriage, and I'm like, that's a wonderful marriage. Like I want to emulate them, and so I asked Patricia, I'm like, how did you know that you wanted to get married to Paul? Like, how did you know that he was like the right person for you to get married? And she gives me like a complete description of the brain state involved with knowing that like Paul was the right, fit for her. And it wouldn't be that she'd be wrong, but that she'd be missing like like that's not the level of analysis I was asking about. It would be
Yeah.
the what it was like to be her when she knew. And just because there's like a perfect one-to-one fit between that and a brain state, like what we're not denying that there's a brain state associated with, or I mean, associated isn't even being that, like there could, like, that experience is a brain state. It is, but I don't know, there's just something that's missing, and I don't know if that the question I guess is like, okay, is that gap a kind of like psychologically descriptive one? Is it a metaphysical one? Is it I don't know. I just don't know. There's something weird about this argument.
And there's something about the I don't know, almost being able to derive or predict experience based on
Yes.
like, the physical facts here that like certainly my
Yes.
intuition is with this argument on this one where it's like, okay, I think one variation of the argument, I don't think it's the original. Maybe the variation is that she's lacking the necessary cones, right?
Hmm.
Like in, for either red or green or
Hmm.
whatever. And it's like, okay, if if she had all the physical facts of the brain state for green when she's never actually experienced what it's like to see green,
Hmm.
is she able to, in a sense, like knowledge transfer in such a way just by knowing the physical facts?
Yes. Yes.
And I think the answer is like my intuition's no.
I completely agree. And then the question is, okay, if you're a materialist, is that the right standard that you should have? Like, okay, if you think that, if you're a materialist and a reductionist, maybe, should it be the case that knowing all, okay, here's the question, should it be the case that knowing all of the physical facts is enough to almost create the experience without experiencing it for yourself? Like, should Mary be able to see red, kind of just, could she be able to concoct up almost like mentally visualize red without actually having to see it or something. But is that even right? I don't even know if
What about this? I mean, like, kind of going off what you're saying there. I mean, I don't know if this will lead us to anything revelatory, but like, okay, if she knows everything about the brain state for red, and then has been given access to some computer where she can set her brain state. If she sets her brain state to the brain state associated with the color red, she will at that point experience red without actually not having seen red, right? If
that
we
seems
think
correct.
that
Yeah.
we think that's true,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that that's merely a physical change,
Mm-hmm.
um, but without actually her having that brain state herself, we assume she is lacking what it is like to see red, that
Agreed.
knowledge of what it is like to see
Agreed.
red. Like she actually needs to inhabit that brain state.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
can't just study the brain state.
Agreed. There,
Like,
no, this is like so tricky because I mean, okay, at the very minimum, the knowing about like how something functions or how it works is not the same thing as having the experience of it.
yes, agreed.
That has to be true, like from this argument, um, because both sides of that coin are true. You can both experience something and have no understanding of like what's going on with it and have the full experience. And the flip side is true. You can know everything there is to know about the thing and have no idea what the experience would be like. Or at least not actually just know what the experience is like. Um,
Yeah, I just want to lay out one final thing for us to think about, maybe, but I just wanted to reduce it even more to the point where we could imagine maybe she inhabits that brain state except for one switch of an atom. So I almost want to imagine like it's simply being like a light switch, where everything else is already in place and it's flipping one thing or changing one thing, because that's conceptually the same thing, but it's really like the flip of a light switch one way or the other, where she does not know what it's like to see red. She flips the light switch. She now can. So she is completely aware of all the physics in place and then flips the light switch or the one atom position and now knows what it's like to see the color red. This, when I conceptualize it in those terms, for me, it's like night and day at that point, where those are two distinct things. Like,
agreed.
It's very much, I mean, she has no idea what it is like to experience red until she flips the switch. So, and she couldn't.
The last thing that I'll say about this is I wonder if what's adding to our confusion is that there's also kind of an unspoken like premise almost in this argument where because we're talking about the experience of like a specific thing, seeing red, and then presumably this is supposed to tell us something about kind of like the hard problem of consciousness in general. So there's some implicit premise about like there's some analogy between consciousness as a whole and what's going on with this experience of seeing red. And I don't know, I'd kind of like to see that more developed because that connection's hazy for me too. You know,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't know that I actually have anything more to say about it besides highlighting that haziness, but that also seems like there's something weird going on with this argument.
Fair enough. All right, we can put a pin in it now. And
Yeah.
I'm sure this will come up like repeatedly throughout the readings. So
Yeah,
like
yeah, I'm sure.
hopefully in more depth and more, because this is just a very kind of high level view of some of these
Yes.
arguments right now. So
Yeah. I wonder like how much more there is to talk about from the Levine and Churchland I guess I do actually like the phrasing from Levine of the explanatory gap. That does actually really kind of crystallize it for me as to the
yeah,
hard problem. So I don't know if this will be helpful, but here's a quote from like the second paragraph of the Levine. Um, he says, the problem, however, is that there are good reasons for thinking that, unlike other macro domains, when it comes to qualia, we are not lacking merely enough detail to provide the requisite explanation, but any idea of how a theory of how such a theory might go. That is, there is an explanatory gap between the physical and the mental, at least when it comes to qualia. Which is, I like his turn of phrase there, but any idea of how such a theory might go, that actually puts it very nicely, where that is kind of what's missing is like, it's not even because, of course, as Churchland points out, we're in the very beginning stages of kind of research into consciousness. But the thing that's troubling for like maybe the most troubling for me, at least when I'm thinking about the legitimacy of the hard problem is like, well, what would an explanation actually even look like? What form would it take? Because for anything that you can conceive of, it's completely possible for me to ask, okay, but why would there be anything like, you know, that experience for that state? So, okay, like you tell me, you give me a detailed brain state of what it's like to see red. And I'm like, okay, like, sure, I don't doubt that that is the brain state of seeing red, but like, but first of all, why couldn't that happen in the dark? And secondly, like, but how on earth does that result in experience? Like, it doesn't even seem to be the right kind of explanation. Where Levine talks about this. There's something about when you provide explanations, when it's a good explanation, it seems to kind of quell your desire for more explanation. So when when you ask me, this isn't from the Levine paper, but it comes up in another paper. When you ask me how on earth like an airplane generates lift, you're like, how the fuck does that happen? Um, I remember this was actually my experience. At first, I actually thought that on a plane, the wings were tilted like this, so it just kind of pushed air underneath and like floated the plane up.
Mm.
But actually, the explanation is that the top of the wing is curved. So the atoms, or like, you don't have to go to like that level of analysis, just the air particles have a longer like track length to run over the top of the wing than the bottom. The bottom is flat. So
Sure.
that means
Bernoulli's principle.
exactly when you increase speed, you reduce pressure. So there's actually a pressure differential on either side of the wing. And I'm like, I hear that explanation. I'm like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. So the wing
Sure.
isn't tilted. It actually, there's a difference in surface area. Yeah. And I'm like, makes complete sense.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's hard to come up with the analogy on the spot, but it's almost like if I provided you an explanation that was maybe like too specific or something like that. It's like I tell you the kind of like geolocations of each particle, you'd be like, yeah, but like how does that? Like if I only told you the positions of the particles, you could be able to tell obviously that like, okay, well, I guess like the particles flowing above are like moving faster than the ones below, but what's going on there? And then you like talk about the pressure differential, you give the full level of analysis, and then you're like, oh, okay, I see now. And it's just like, I mean, again, this dangers on being an argument from ignorance, but like, how could it be that information processing or whatever the fuck is like going on in the brain, the question is, why should there be anything that it's like to be that collection of atoms moving in that specific way? And I don't know. It's just it does seem like you could tell me everything there is to know, and I wouldn't be and it wouldn't actually explain the presence of consciousness. It wouldn't.
I'm still, and I'm trust me, I have like the same intuition you
Yeah.
do, but I'm also kind of like still a little bit, and this too is just once again like an argument from ignorance, but when I begin to kind of like create like these kind of mental models in a sense, where I
Mm,
start very limited, where I just imagine like, okay, simple chemical reactions as I understand them. And I'm
mm,
like, okay, could I imagine a more complex physical process? Like I can, like in my head. And then I imagine some layer of like abstraction where, perhaps there is some physical system of molecules that are responding to the output of other physical systems. And it's like, okay, I could imagine almost in some sense like an input output simple
mm,
interpretation type thing.
mm,
And then my mind just short circuits at that point, as there are just, okay, well, why don't we increase that process right there, just its complexity times a billion or times a trillion. And then we're at this state now here, with experience associated with
mhm.
it. And it's just like, okay, well, how could you imagine that, experience could emerge? And it's like, I
Yes.
can't imagine anything more complex than, I don't know, maybe in my head, if I spent some real time sitting
Hmm.
down, I could probably conceive of something that's 100 atoms.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, we're talking about, how many atoms are we talking about in the brain? Trillions,
Brilliance. Yeah.
right? Because there are billions of neurons, and each neuron is made of probably, I don't
I
want to
don't
guess too
know.
much, but hundreds of millions of atoms. So it's just like, I don't know, like, so it's
Yeah.
just like we're talking about unbelievable orders of magnitude, and there's a little bit of hide the ball when it comes to that. Like I grant that entirely,
Yeah.
and it's just like, okay, well, you know, you're saying the more complex physical systems, suddenly there is something like being a more complex physical system, and it's like, I don't know, maybe I don't know.
And the other thing that I was thinking about too is that it's so difficult to even know what to make of my own intuitions with respect to what you were saying because, well, it's like I wonder if a lot of our inability to conceive of something that's not conscious, if that's like what the hang up is that it's kind of almost like an anthropocentric issue where like, okay, I know I'm conscious, and then you tell me to think about a system as complex as me, and I kind of just think of myself. You know what I mean? Like, well, then it would have to be conscious, like, because I am. But obvious, you know what I mean? But that, I mean, that doesn't seem like there's not a robust connection there. Like, because if you think about uh, your phone is more complex than you are with respect to certain things.
Sure, sure.
And can I conceive? Could I conceive that there's nothing that is like to be my phone? Absolutely.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah, I
You know what I
think,
mean?
yeah. So like
So
I can imagine highly complex physical systems like computers not being conscious. Like I totally agree.
completely agree. But then at
Yeah,
the same time, it also seems like there shouldn't be anything that's special about like wetware. That
yeah.
makes it con. So then it's like, okay, that again is like kind of a way of getting behind the conceivability argument in a way that I think at least like I think like at its best, the conceivability argument is like it's opening the door for like, okay, but you've got to fill in that gap with your explanation because like I do like if you think about how a lot of these kind of like more dismissive theories go. This is a dangerous thing to say because it's not even true. I'm not accusing anyone specifically of doing this, but I could imagine a way of investigating this where all you're doing is you're finding kind of the correlates or the physical instantiations of what we're talking about, and then you just say, well, it's this. But if you can reasonably ask the question, but why is there anything that it's like to be that state? Then like you haven't answered the question at least fully, right? Like just imagine if no one shared our intuitions about the hard problem. So it's kind of just Churchland's almost like, oh, it's all hornswoggling. Um, no one who shares our intuitions is working in this field. I could imagine an amazingly developed area of science that wouldn't answer the hard problem at all. Like you could just be asking like why, like, okay, like, but why is there anything that it's like to see red? Like, why does red look like that? And the answer would just be the brain state of seeing red. And I was like, yeah, I'm not saying that's wrong, but is that all there is to say about it? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely share your intuition on that. I completely agree. I think there is something more to it than simply saying, this is the way there, it is because of a physical system that underlies it. Like it there, but why?
Yeah.
It
There,
doesn't
there
answer the why.
there's maybe I'll throw a few more things on the table and then we can wrap up. Maybe things
Sure.
to like flag for subsequent episodes. There's another way of phrasing. I remember this because it was a note that I wrote in the Levine. Another way of thinking about the conceivability argument is that, like, and this seems to like make it even greater for me, is like, okay, if there's an explanatory gap, a way of thinking about, okay, well, how do we know when there's a gap? Well, here's one way of thinking about it. Could things have plausibly gone differently? And if so, there seems to be a gap that you haven't fully filled. So with the plane, the wing of a plane, if I tell you about what I told you, it's actually not conceivable to ask, could it have gone differently? Like I that question doesn't get off the ground for me. Um,
Yeah, in the same way Levine gave the example of boiling water.
that was his,
Like
yeah,
like
perfect.
yeah,
Yeah.
like when you understand, like, could water boil at a different temperature given
Yes.
these, you know, um given these physical inputs, in a sense, like when you really understand what's happening when water boils, like the answer is like, no, it's not really a coherent concept, like when you start,
Yes.
discussing things like vapor pressure
Hmm.
and, like
Yes.
the, average kinetic energy and whatnot. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not really, doesn't make any sense. So
And it's funny to like because you would totally have this reaction. Like I've had this reaction too when someone's like not getting a concept. Like if you've been in class and something clicks for you, but someone else it like hasn't clicked yet, and they just keep asking. Like you're like, but don't you see it? Like there,
yeah,
once you have the explanation, there kind of isn't anything more to ask if it's an explanation that fits correctly.
sure,
Um,
sure.
and I think so this is what Levine refers to as like the open question argument, is that there are these open questions still with physical accounts of consciousness where, okay, you tell me like it is information in a web structure of this way being kind of um, exchanged in this frequency, this pattern, whatever. If you can still have no idea why there's consciousness associated with that, then the question still seems open in that sense, in a way that when I tell you about the physics of the air flowing over the wing, there doesn't really seem to be an open question anymore. There could be open questions about other things. You could have an open question about um, you know, Bernoulli's equation, why does speed inversely relate to pressure? Like that's an open question, but that's now about a different thing.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, I just wanted to flag that. Oh, there's another thing that I want to flag. I remember this came up in like our previous conversations with Giffen, but I kept remember I remember I kept raising this point. Um, and I don't know if there's anything to this or not, but like there's this other interesting thing where if if uh when we're talking about like all of this physical knowledge that we have about consciousness, it seems like epistemically there's only one flow to the information. It's only from experiential to materialistic or reductionistic levels of analysis, where if you ask, what's the brain state associated with pain, or like what the brain state of pain is? Well, you only know that we only know what the brain looks like when someone's in pain because we create pain and then look at what the brain state is. And the order of explanation never seems to flow the opposite way. We never learn anything first physically that then informs our experiential knowledge of it.
Sure.
And I don't know what to make of that, but it's like something that I wanted to flag as we kind of move through the
No, definitely. That'll be a good point to flag there.
move through the course.
No, it's gonna be a ton of fun, this course.
No, I completely agree.
Ton of fun.
I completely agree. I think
first talk was already good.
Agreed. I think we talked enough about the Churchland paper. People kind of get what it's talking about. It's very short if you want to read it. I mean, she's basically just saying that we've been hornswoggled into thinking that this is a problem because we've all been arguing from ignorance. I mean, I think that gets it.
Yeah, that's pretty much the argument.
Yeah.
And I think there is some truth to that.
I think there's a real danger. I think there's a real danger.
I think we could still discuss this in future. I don't want to slander, Churchland here, but at the same time, I will say that on some points, I didn't feel like Churchland was as charitable towards some of the intuitions some of us share.
Completely. She was very dismissive.
Yeah. I think that there were some physical analogies. I know it's kind of the end that it's, we're not doing a fair representation, but I thought there were some physical analogies to the hard problem of consciousness that they didn't seem to parallel as well as I would perceive them to.
Agreed. And if they come up, as we're talking about other things, then sure. No, I think this is going to be very enjoyable. I'm very open to like many explanations.
Oh no, for sure. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So, all right, man. Let's wrap it up, though. All right.
Yes, let's wrap it up. I don't know what we'll be discussing next, but it'll be something kind of delving deeper into one of these issues. So, cool. Hope people enjoy the intro, and now it's time for some football.
I'll be back. Yeah.
All right. Tune in next time. I've started a new Instagram. You can find that by searching for the user name is Plato's Cave Podcast. That's all one word, no apostrophe in Plato's. You can find me as you could before on Twitter or X at Jordan_C_Myers. And my website, jordanmyers.org, is going to be updated shortly. It's a good way to sort of, I guess, either get in touch with me. You can contact me through there, or it's also a place that I'm going to trying to use to upload sort of recent work of mine that I'm in the process of developing.